All right, the purpose of this video is to walk you through the mock AP. I'm just going to go through and grade a student response, and hopefully this helps give you an idea of how to interpret your own feedback that you should be able to see on AP Classroom on the mock AP. So the first question you answered on your own was question 2, and this one was all about schizophrenia. So schizophrenia is a clinical disorder where essentially there's a variety of symptoms, including like illusions, hallucinations. Essentially, the person doesn't have a clear grip on reality, and they experience like illusions and hallucinations. So schizophrenia is really interesting because no one really knows what causes it. It's a very mysterious psychological disorder. The only thing psychologists really know about schizophrenia is that a schizophrenic brain just looks different than a healthy brain. So we don't know exactly what causes it. We do know that the brain of someone with schizophrenia just looks different than a healthy brain. Okay. So Dr. Hernandez is studying the causes, consequences, and treatments of schizophrenia. In her current study, she is examining whether 6 people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia improve from baseline after receiving a new drug being tested to alleviate the symptoms of the disease. She measures 2 different variables at pre- and post-drug ingestion, one being levels of a neurotransmitter and the other being levels of positive symptoms of the disease. The results for each of the variables are displayed in the table below. So positive symptoms of the disease, that does not necessarily mean it's like a positive thing in the sense that it's something that you want to happen. Positive symptoms of the disease would just be testing positive. So it would be a symptom that says, yes, this person does have schizophrenia. So an example could be like a hallucination or hearing voices in their head. Those would be positive symptoms of the disease. Okay, so she gives 6 people this drug. She tests a level of a certain neurotransmitter before they take the test, and then, or before they take the drug, and then after they take the drug. And then they also measure the number of symptoms, like schizophrenic symptoms the person has before the test and then after the test. The first thing you're asked to do is explain the primary reason Dr. Hernandez should be hesitant about making inferences based on her study. So the key thing here is there's just too few people involved. So an inference would be basically her concluding some generalization about people with schizophrenia. So she could be like, oh, the drug works to alleviate or to decrease the symptoms of schizophrenia. She can't really do that because she's only testing 6 people. Her sample size is too small. She can't really conclude anything if she's just trying the drug on 6 people. So let's see the student response. This student said Dr. Hernandez should be hesitant on making inferences based on her study because she has such a small sample of people that is surveying and studying that she cannot really speak any inferences about whether the new drug being tested is a positive thing or not. Okay, perfect. So this point scores. The response must refer to the small sample size that Dr. Hernandez used and its consequences for generalizing to the population. Okay, and then the second part of the question asks, describe the relationship between the neurotransmitter level and the number of positive symptoms displayed. So basically asking you to describe the relationship between these 2 graphs, the neurotransmitter levels pre-test and post-test, and how does that relate to the number of symptoms displayed pre-test and post-test. Okay, and let's see what she said. She said the relationship between the neurotransmitter level and the number of positive symptoms displayed is correlated exactly within the 6 patients being studied. Before the drug was admitted to the patients, the amount of neurotransmitter level and the amount of positive symptoms was measured both 25, both decreased to 17.5 after the drug was admitted to the patients. Okay, perfect. So she's noticing the 2 graphs literally look exactly the same. They both were at 25 and then went down to halfway between 15 and 20, which would be 17.5. And she's noticing the 2 graphs are exactly the same. So there's some relationship between as she said, there's a correlation between the neurotransmitter and this number of symptoms displayed. They both decreased due to this drug, due to this medicine that was given to the schizophrenic patients. So that looks great. Here it says response must indicate that there is a direct relationship. She used the word correlation, which is excellent, between the level of the neurotransmitter and the positive symptoms displayed. As one goes down, the other goes down in direct proportion. Yeah, so she did excellent on that part. Okay, part 3 is identifying the dependent variables. So simple just says identify the dependent variables in the study. So the dependent variables would be, she says, the dependent variables in the study is neurotransmitter levels and the number of positive symptoms displayed. Yes, I could see this being confusing because many of you just named one of these as the dependent variables, but they're actually both. We haven't really looked at that many studies that have 2 dependent variables, so I could see how that could be a little bit confusing. In this case, the independent variable is the drug. So that's the thing that the experimenter, Dr. Hernandez, is changing, right? That she's giving the 6 patients the drug, the medicine for schizophrenia. So that's the independent variable. And then she's measuring how people's neurotransmitter levels respond and how their symptoms respond. So there's 2 dependent variables she's measuring. The actual symptoms, like that the person has, and like their actual behavior, and then the chemical changes in their brain. And she wants to measure both of those as dependent variables. Okay, cool. Level of neurotransmitter and the number of positive symptoms. Next part 4, is describe one of the positive symptoms of schizophrenia that Dr. Hernandez may have measured. Okay, so we actually didn't get to this unit in psychology. This was going to be one of our last units, was going to be studying different psychological disorders. So this is something that you have to look up. What are the symptoms of schizophrenia? Let's see what she said. And she did great. One of the positive symptoms of schizophrenia that Dr. Hernandez may have measured is the amount of hallucinations the patients experience before and after the drug is given to the patients. Excellent. So hallucinations is definitely a symptom of schizophrenia. And here are all the things that would have scored: hallucinations, delusions, disorganized speech, or disorganized behavior. That's pretty general. But I'd say hallucinations and illusions or delusions would be 2 definite symptoms of schizophrenia. Okay, next part is the experiment, and the question asks, oh, interesting, explain why the study was not a true experiment. Okay, let's see what she said. She said the study was not a true experiment because in order for this to be considered an experiment, there would need to be a requirement of a control group, perfect, within the experiment, meaning there would need to be patients that don't receive the new drug being tested. Yes, beautiful. So that is the key that Dr. Hernandez would need to make this into an experiment, is she would need to have a group of patients that were not receiving the drug. That way she could say, she could conclude cause and effect, right? She could say the people not receiving the drug are having a different experience than the people receiving the drug. Therefore, the drug is effective. There's some difference between the control group, people that don't take the drug, and the experimental group, the people that do take the drug. Okay, so the student said there was no comparison control group, so this is not a true experiment. The other thing you could have said that would have scored is that there was no random assignment. Okay. Explain why a personality inventory would have been inappropriate for Dr. Hernandez to use as part of the study. This is kind of complicated, and again, we didn't cover this unit, so this wouldn't show up on the AP, like this particular question, but let's see. Okay. She said a personality inventory would have been appropriate for Dr. Hernandez to use as part of the study because the patients are already diagnosed with schizophrenia, meaning a lot of symptoms that they experience cannot be trusted for them to take a personality inventory survey nor test. Also affects how eligible people are for the study. Yes, so the basic idea here is like the personality tests that we looked at in our previous unit were those personality tests like Myers-Briggs or the Ocean personality test, the Big Five. Those are all based on what psychologists would call a healthy personality, and they don't apply to people with like these specialized clinical disorders like schizophrenia. So that what she said is great. Let's see. Okay. Response must indicate that personality inventories would not yield data about the neurotransmitter level or about positive symptoms of schizophrenia. Okay. So this is saying that personality inventories would not tell us anything about what Dr. Hernandez is actually trying to measure, which is the neurotransmitter levels or the positive symptoms of schizophrenia. I agree with what she's saying, so I'm going to give her the point. I think, because that completely makes sense to me. Because the patients are already diagnosed, a lot of symptoms they experience cannot be trusted for them to take a personality inventory survey. All right, last part is the brain scan. So it's asking what differences do you notice between the schizophrenic brain and a healthy brain? So I'm guessing what they're looking for here is a description of like the specific parts of the brain that are not missing, but that are smaller in the schizophrenic brain. So it says response must indicate that the ventricles in the person exhibiting schizophrenia are enlarged. So this brain structure here, the ventricles, is enlarged in the schizophrenic brain. She said the major difference between the brain of a person with schizophrenia and the brain of a person without schizophrenia is that person with schizophrenia, the middle part of the brain is extremely enlarged compared to that of a person who doesn't have schizophrenia. The enlarged part of the brain is the ventricles that increase as the symptoms of being schizophrenic increase. Okay, so she talked about the middle part of the brain, and she said she identified that middle part of the brain as being the ventricles. Okay. I'm going to make a separate video for the third question, just in case you only wanted to watch one of the videos. So I'm going to end this video here and then click on the next video to watch me score question number 3.